Hey up, it's Steve from that old Yorkshire gig, and it's list time. Yes, and it's another Star Trek list, as you may have guessed from the backdrop. This time we're looking at 10 times Vulcans, we're back with Vulcans again, 10 times Vulcans were Star Trek villains. This is from Screen Rant, so let's just get on with it, shall we? There we go. The Vulcans have been an integral part of the Star Trek universe since the very start, but not every member of the species is as upstanding as Spock. Originally, Spock was supposed to be Martian, and early on is described as Vulcanian, I think, but that's by the by. Go away, Ad. I won't, never mind. Right, so ignore that bit. Right, the Vulcans have been a core part of the Federation from the very beginning, but they have not always been a positive influence, as these Vulcan Star Trek villains demonstrate. The Vulcans were the first alien species created by Gene Roddenberry for Star Trek and were immortalised by Leonard Nimoy's Spock. There have been several notable Vulcans across the whole franchise, from Sub-Commander T'Pol, Jolene Blaylock, in Star Trek Enterprise, to Provisional Lieutenant T'Lyn, Gabrielle Ruiz, in Star Trek Lower Decks. No matter how fraught relations were between T'Pol and Captain Jonathan Archer, Scott Bakula, she was always on the side of good. The same can't be said of Star Trek's evil Vulcans. Not really evil, though, are they? Essentially. Because, as it says here, who often act out of a fanatical devotion to Vulcan logic, which isn't really logical, is it? But never mind. Or their own difficulties in suppressing their emotions. Although the Vulcans aren't as well known for their villainy as their Romulan cousins, there has been a considerable amount of Vulcan villains. I don't say that. V for Vendetta. Vulcan villains, the verisimilitude and the vichyssoise of villainy, peppered throughout the Star Trek history. Right, number 10. The Vulcan monks in Star Trek Enterprise, the Andorian Incident. By the way, I really like the Vulcans in Star Trek Enterprise. Because they're sneaky. They're not the Vulcans we know from 100 years later. And that gets explained in Season 4 as to why there's a bit of a change in Vulcan behaviour. It was a slightly different Vulcan to the ones that would come to pass and end up forming the Federation with Earth and Andor and Tellar. But anyway, right, the Andorians appear to be the main villains of the Star Trek Enterprise episode The Andorian Incident, when they take a Vulcan monastery hostage. The Andorians believed rightly that P'Jem wasn't a Vulcan spiritual retreat and was instead a listening post for spying on their Andorian neighbours. By the end of the episode, Captain Jonathan Archer, Scott Bakula, is briefly held at gunpoint by an initiate in a desperate attempt to prevent the information from leaking out. Badly. They weren't very good, these Vulcan monks. I think they were actual monks, because they weren't very good at fighting. They soon got bested. It was an early indicator that the Vulcans in Star Trek Enterprise weren't as squeaky clean as their 23rd and 24th century counterparts. But we'd learned that already, even from the pilot episode, the first episode, Broken Bow, we could see that the Vulcans weren't quite the same Vulcans that we know, because Ambassador, I forgot his bloody name now. Anyway, the Ambassador in there kind of loses his temper a bit with Jonathan Archer, and Jonathan Archer points this out. Right, anyway, number 9, Talaris in Star Trek Enterprise Fusion. There he is, picking up Captain Archer, reminding us that Vulcans are really, really strong. I think they sometimes forget that. In the Star Trek Enterprise episode Fusion, Talaris, Enrique Murciano, assaulted T'Pol when he continued an invasive mind meld without her consent. At this point in Star Trek history, mind melding was taboo in Vulcan society, which meant that Talaris had not been properly educated in the procedure. Talaris' invasive psychological abuse of T'Pol led to him being forcibly ejected from the Enterprise NX-01 after he lost control of his emotions and violently attacked Captain Archer. T'Pol also contracted Panar syndrome from this procedure, but due to the taboo around mind melds in Vulcan society, it took a long time for her condition to be cured. Which could also explain how she became kind of emotionally unhinged for pretty much the rest of the the Enterprise series. Her emotions were always close to the surface. But then again, her mother said that in season 4. She said that T'Pol's emotions were always close to the surface, and she always struggled to suppress them. But anyway. Right, number 8, Administrator Velas in Star Trek Enterprise, Awakening and Kier Shara. And there he's played by Robert Foxworth, who generally played baddies in Star Trek. He played baddie admirals and all sorts of stuff. This time he's playing the head of the Vulcan government. But you can tell Vulcan baddies that the names don't generally begin with S. Tuvok, I don't know, but no, the male Vulcans generally named began with S, unless they didn't, as in Tuvok, and the other one as well. I forgot his name now. In another one in Voyager and one in Enterprise. So in Next Generation. So I'm talking out my ass. Right, never mind. Administrator Velas, Robert Foxworth, was the leader of Vulcan High Command in Star Trek Enterprise again. Because Vulcans did, they were, highly present in Star Trek Enterprise because they were Earth's main alien ally at that time. Anyway, so would have sanctioned the use of P'Jem as a listening post. Velas's devious nature becomes more pronounced in the Enterprise Season 4 two-parter, Awakening Kier Shara, where he allies with a Romulan infiltrator. This is the episode where Archer carries the Catra of Surak, which is interesting. And it's the one where we see how the Vulcan governmental political structure is changed at the end of it, and T'Pau essentially rises to power, sort of. Anyway, Velas and Talok Todd Stashwick. Ooh, yes. Oh, go on to play, obviously, Captain Liam Shaw in Star Trek Picard. Were plotting a military alliance that would have enabled the invasion of Andoria. However, Velas was willing to sell his own people down the river, agreeing to have Vulcan pass into the Romulan Star Empire's rule, just so he could defeat his old enemies, the Andorians. Thankfully, Archer, T'Pol, and a younger version of Star Trek, the original series, is T'Pau, Zara Zedika, thwart them. That just ends the sentence. Never mind. Yes, the defeat, the thwart his plans, and a new system of government arises on Vulcan. Right, Velatak in Star Trek Discovery, Lethe. I don't know. This was stupid. I've never been a fan of Star Trek Discovery, although, as I said, I didn't mind the first season. I think this episode is actually from the first season. Anyway, the Vulcan logic extremists, it doesn't make a huge amount of sense, does it? Were a group of fanatics who believed in the true Vulcan ideology of logic above all else. In the Star Trek Discovery episode Lethe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Velatak, Luke Humphrey, infiltrated the inner circle of Ambassador Sarek, James Frey, Spock's father, piloting Sarek to crucial diplomatic talks during Discovery's Klingon War. Velatak, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong as well, turned himself into a bomb with the intention of killing the Vulcan diplomat. Sarek was a frequent target of the extremists because of his involvement with the Federation and his marriage to his human wife, Amanda Grayson, Mia Kirshner. Yeah, that's it. Sometimes their logic is baffling. Right, number 6, Vulcan logic extremist bombers in Star Trek Discovery. Another example of it from before this event, because that's young Michael Burnham there. A crucial part of the backstory of Captain Michael Burnham, Sonequa Martin Green, is the terrorist attack that nearly killed her as a child. In an earlier assassination attempt against Sarek, logic extremists bombed the Vulcan Education Centre, intending to kill him and his wife Amanda. Sarek and Amanda survived the blast, obviously, but their adopted daughter Michael was clinically dead. I still don't understand why they called her Michael. Just baffling. Was clinically dead for 3 minutes. Sarek revived Michael with a Vulcan mind meld, transferring a portion of his Catra and bonding the two for life. Number 5, Cybok in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Kind of is a villain, but he wasn't really villainous, but I don't know. I wouldn't have called him a villain, but never mind. He had his reasons for doing what he did. and he didn't hurt anybody intentionally. Spock's half-brother Sybok, Lawrence Luckinbill, was introduced as the main antagonist in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Good example, good word use there. Not really a villain, he's an antagonist. Sybok rejected Vulcan logic in favour of embracing emotion like his ancestors, which saw him incarcerated in the Ankeshton Katil Rehabilitation Centre. I think they've got that from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, so I don't remember seeing that mentioned in Star Trek V. But we did see the back of his head in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Sybok later embraced spirituality and hijacked the USS Enterprise A to pursue a vision he experienced of what he believed to be God himself. Although Sybok had taken criminal means to pursue his quest, he redeemed himself by sacrificing his life to defeat the malevolent entity masquerading as God, which helped the Enterprise to escape. That's a start. I enjoy Star Trek V. It gets a pasting critically, but you know, it's fun. It's fun. And Sybok were a good character. Lawrence Luckinbill's a great actor. But I don't understand why they just... At the beginning, we see him laughing with this fella here, that chap. We see him laughing. And he goes, "You're a Vulcan." And then he starts laughing, and then he goes, "Oh," and then he says, "Oh, hang on, maybe you're Romulan then." That's what I'd have thought. If you see a Vulcan laughing, you'd immediately think, "Oh, he must be Romulan." But no. He was a laughing Vulcan. Number 4, Lieutenant Valeris in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, who were originally supposed to be Savick, but they changed their mind and introduced a new character. Right, Lieutenant Valeris, Kim Cattrall, betrayed her mentor, Captain Spock. I'll learn to read one of these days. By being complicit in the Khitomer conspiracy to derail peace talks with the Klingon Empire and the Federation. Valeris supplied the Klingon conspirators with a personal log that implicated Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, in the murder of Chancellor Gorkon, David Warner. Valeris also murdered her 2 Starfleet co-conspirators, Yeomans Burke and Samno, to prevent them from sharing information about their role in actually assassinating Gorkon by a phaser on stun at close range. So we learn that'll kill you. Don't know how, but it does. Valeris believed that peace with the Klingons was illogical, which is why she joined the vast conspiracy to prevent those peace talks from taking place. She was kind of a baddie, although she thought it was logical to do what she would do. She thought her acts were logical, and that forming an alliance or peace with the Klingons, was not the way forward for the Federation. And you could say that Spock kind of became villainous in that film when he forced a mind meld onto her to get information out of her, which was not very Vulcan, but it was a necessary thing to do. Pardon me. Number 3, Tuvok in Star Trek Voyager Repression. There he is with Commander Chakotay. I wish they'd remaster it in HD. I really do. Although it was under the psychic influence of Tiro Anadis, however you pronounce that, Zarabajka, Lieutenant Commander Tuvok, was he Lieutenant Commander at the time? Yeah, it looks like it. Tim Russ was the villain of the Star Trek Voyager episode Repression, having received a subliminal message from the villainous Bajoran unlocked the mental conditioning that Tuvok had received years earlier. Tuvok was effectively a Maquis sleeper agent who had been reactivated and set about planting Tiro's subconscious messages into Voyager's Maquis crew members. This led to a Maquis uprising aboard Voyager that was almost successful until Tuvok broke free from his conditioning and averted the mutiny. You know what, I don't remember that episode. Genuinely don't remember. I've obviously seen it. I must have seen it. So I've been rewatching Voyager as well, and I don't remember coming across it. I will have seen it. Maybe this description doesn't do it justice. But anyway. Number 2, Lieutenant Chulak. Isn't that a planet? That's Teal'c's homeworld, isn't it, in Stargate SG-1? Lieutenant Chulak in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Field of Fire. And there he is with a trill. In Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode Field of Fire, Lieutenant Chulak Marty Rackham was a rare thing, a Vulcan serial killer. Chulak suffered a psychological breakdown following the destruction of the USS Grissom by the Jem'Hadar. Oh no, I'm going to say with the same Grissom that we saw in Star Trek 3, but obviously not, because that was blown up by the Klingons, wasn't it? But a new USS Grissom. The Vulcan officer lost control of his emotions and set about murdering members of the DS9 crew, targeting his victims with a TR-116 rifle equipped with a microtransporter. Chulak selected his victims based on whether they had images of people showing emotion on display in their quarters, because logic demanded it. Lieutenant Ezri-Dax, this is obviously Season 7 of Deep Space Nine, Lieutenant Ezri-Dax, Nicole de Boer, eventually brought Chulak to justice. And number 1, Kryn in Star Trek Picard, Imposters. This is a Vulcan I never understood it. Why they made him a Vulcan. Like a Vulcan gangster. Baffling, I thought it was. The most un-Vulcan Vulcan in the universe. Anyway, Vulcan gangster Kryn, Kirk Acevedo, was kingpin of the Valashi crime syndicate in Star Trek Picard Season 3, which were generally very good, was Star Trek Picard Season 3. I don't think it was as good as people made it out to be, but it was, orders of magnitude better than the previous 2 seasons. But it did have its faults. Kryn used Vulcan logic in his criminal endeavours, brokering for a device that exploited the illogical flaws in the Daystrom Station's security systems. Kryn also believed it was logical in a utopia like Star Trek's future for there also to be crime, something which he excelled at. It makes no sense whatsoever. Captain Worf, Michael Dorn, and Commander Raffi Musica, Michelle Hurd, exploited Kryn's logic by threatening his life in exchange for the device that was used to break into Daystrom. As I said, I don't know, why did they just make him Romulan? Just make him Romulan, then you wouldn't have to go through all this rigmarole of him being Vulcan and using logic. Just make him Romulan. And then, everybody said, fair enough, a Romulan gangster. And people could have believed that. Right, and that's it. Can think of any more examples of baddie Vulcans? Not off the top of my head. But there we go. No, I can't think of any. Not off the top of me. I'm sure there are others. Right, so we'll leave that there. A quick show today. A quick list. So 10 times Vulcans were Star Trek villains. But not always villains. Sometimes just antagonists. Sometimes just, a foil for our heroes to go up against. Right, so apologies for the adverts. I had to disable my ad blocker. So there you go. So you can get Amazon Music for 4 months for free. Right, so we'll leave it there. So let's get rid of that. So thanks for watching. Wherever you are, look after each other. And until next time, I'll say thee.